Nicole, Auerbach, Jordan Cornette here, and what an NCAA tournament it has been. The dust has settled. 4 teams headed to San Antonio, and it is very chalky. The 1 seeds advance on in Auburn, Florida, Duke, and Houston. And Nicole, my basketball Buddha, you did say this thing was going to be chalky coming in, and here we are, chalk of the highest order. Your thoughts, and congratulations on being right.
Well, first of all, congratulations to all of the people that fill out a bracket and just pick the number 1 seeds. And you're usually their brackets bust. And this year it turns out that they are right. But it felt like it was one of those years where that was possible. I mean, you could talk yourself into being concerned about Auburn with the way that they kind of finished the regular season into the selection Sunday. You couldn't really talk yourself out of Duke unless you wanted to say, oh, their level of competition all year wasn't as strong as everybody else's. Houston was kind of flying under the radar. I think people just kind of put them in a different category. They were like, they're very good defensively. They're better offensively, but they just weren't like a sexy pick. People weren't talking about them. And then Florida, red hot coming out of the SEC tournament. So I think it made sense that these were the 4 teams that were heavily favored. And no matter what the paths, right? Some of them had the toughest possible seed line. Some of them had really challenging draws based on KenPom ratings of their opponents. But these were the best teams in the country all year. I mean, and I think for the most part, you could even say Auburn and Duke for much of the regular season were the 2 best teams in the country. And that was a lot of the conversation. So not terribly shocked that we got it, although it is much harder than people think to get a Final Four with all 4 number 1 seeds. It's only happened once before, also in San Antonio. So not shocked. But I think that it is fitting for this year where it did feel like there were tiers of teams and this was the top tier.
Yeah, Nicole, I don't think anybody would say shocked, most especially because of the path from the 4 teams, right? A complete team, so it should really be no surprise. I mean, you got great coaching in all 4 teams. Some coaches longer in the tooth than others, historic Hall of Fame type resumes, a guy like Coach Kelvin Sampson, obviously Coach Bruce Pearl. Then you've got 2 younger coaches in Coach Shire and Coach Golden that have done magnificent jobs. You've got star power in all 4 teams. But it's not just a star to ride the back of to get you there. These teams are complete teams. They have a depth. They have an identity. They're really good on both sides of the basketball. They have high-level athleticism. To me, questions have been answered about these teams. One of the biggest questions, and we'll talk a little bit about them here in a little bit, but Duke, coming from a conference that had a historically down year in the ACC, and they hadn't really been challenged, Nicole. So people said, what's going to happen with game pressure? Well, they answered that question by avoiding that game pressure with how they handle inflection points. This team is so good when they're challenged, they then distance themselves. So I was marveling at the level of play from these 1 seeds. Florida being able to do the job late to get in speaks to their resiliency, but I think we're poised for one of the best Final Fours of all time. That's not hyperbole on my end.
No, it's not. These are 4 of the most offensive and defensive efficient teams ever in the KenPom era. From the beginning of 1996 to now, they're all in that category of some of the best teams ever on both sides of the ball. So you are expecting great games. As you mentioned, great stars. So you have the 2 players that have won the National Player of the Year awards in Cooper Flagg and Janai Broome. You have Walter Clayton Jr., who looks like the best player on the court a lot of the time when he's playing. And he's been one of the most clutch players in the tournament to date. So I'm with you. I think there's really high expectations for the games, for the Final 4 games. Now that we have endured so much chalk for all of these other rounds, I think you're hoping that it sets up masterpieces of final games in San Antonio.
Yeah, and you got powerhouse fan bases, so people are going to travel down there to San Antonio. To me, and we've had this conversation leading up, and it's worth reiterating now, is this is great for the college basketball game. You know, the women's side's been on a rocket ship. They're in a great place. The men's game is kind of trying to figure out what it is right now, and it doesn't help with this transfer portal, the NIL, and all the money floating around. You want to see your season crowning the best champion with the best version of basketball in the late stages. And the beauty of it is we're going to get that in Auburn, Florida, Duke, and Houston. This is putting on display and the biggest stage when the casuals join the rest of us who've been covering this sport and go, oh, wow, there's still a ton of cohesion, connectivity, high-level basketball to boast. And I think that's very important in this time right now to get out there and see the 3 best games still left in what has been a late season. So I'm very excited for this. Great reason to be with all 4 number 1 seeds advancing for the first time since 2008.